The stagecoach lurched violently as it hit another rut in the dusty road, and Beatrice Garrison pressed her hand against the worn leather seat to steady herself, wondering if starting over in New Mexico territory was the biggest mistake of her life or her only chance at salvation. She had left Philadelphia 3 weeks ago with nothing but 2 trunks of belongings, a small inheritance from her deceased aunt, and a determination to escape the scandal that had nearly destroyed her. Her former fiancé had gambled away not only his own fortune, but had attempted to use her name to secure loans he never intended to repay. When the creditors came calling, they did not care that she had broken off the engagement the moment she discovered his deception. The whispers had followed her everywhere. A woman's reputation, once tarnished, was nearly impossible to restore, regardless of her innocence. The other passengers in the coach included an older woman who had fallen asleep almost immediately after leaving the last station, a traveling salesman who spent most of the journey staring out the window, and a young couple who spoke in hushed, excited tones about the farm they hoped to start. Beatrice envied their optimism, their shared dream. She had once believed in such things. The landscape outside had transformed over the past hours from rolling hills to something wilder, more open. The sky stretched endlessly above them, a brilliant blue that seemed impossible after years of Philadelphia's gray winters. Red rock formations jutted from the earth like ancient monuments, and scattered juniper trees dotted the terrain. It was beautiful in a harsh, unforgiving way that matched her current mood perfectly. "We will be stopping at the way station in about an hour," the driver had called down during their last brief stop. "Then it is another half day to Santa Rosa." Santa Rosa. The name meant nothing to her, except that it was where the stagecoach line ended and where she would begin her new life. She had responded to an advertisement for a schoolteacher, and the town council had written back accepting her application. The salary was modest, but it included room and board. It was enough. It had to be enough. The stagecoach hit another bump, and this time something cracked loudly beneath them. The vehicle lurched to one side, throwing Beatrice against the wall. The older woman woke with a startled cry, and the young husband grabbed his wife to keep her from falling. The coach tilted at a dangerous angle, skidding along the road before finally coming to a shuddering stop. "Everyone all right in there?" the driver called down, his voice tight with concern. Beatrice pushed herself upright, her shoulder aching from where it had struck the wall. "I think so," she called back. The salesman forced open the door, which now hung at an odd angle, and climbed out. Beatrice followed, helping the older woman down while the young couple came after. The midday sun beat down on them with surprising intensity, and Beatrice raised her hand to shade her eyes. The rear axle had cracked clean through. Even to her untrained eye, the damage looked severe. The driver, a grizzled man in his 50s, stood staring at it with his hands on his hips and creative cursing under his breath. "Can it be fixed?" the young husband asked. "Not here, not without proper tools and a replacement part." The driver removed his hat and wiped his forehead. "We are about 5 miles from the way station. I will have to ride one of the horses there and get help." "What about us?" the older woman asked, her voice quavering. "You will wait here. I will be back before nightfall with a wagon." He looked at each of them in turn. "Stay with the coach. There is water in the canteen. Do not wander off." It was not the most reassuring plan, but there seemed little choice. The driver unhitched one of the horses, swung himself up with practiced ease, and set off down the road at a steady trot, leaving the 5 passengers standing beside the broken stagecoach in the middle of the New Mexico territory wilderness. The first hour passed slowly. They shared the water sparingly, and tried to find what shade they could on the north side of the coach. The young couple introduced themselves as Margaret and Thomas Brennan from Ohio. The older woman was Mrs. Edith Patterson, going to live with her daughter's family. The salesman, Henry Morton, soon wandered a short distance away to smoke his pipe. Beatrice found herself watching the horizon, studying the unfamiliar landscape. The silence was profound, broken only by the occasional bird call or the whisper of wind through dry grass. She had never experienced anything like it. Philadelphia had been full of constant noise, the clatter of carriages, the calls of street vendors, the general hum of thousands of people living in close quarters. "Are you frightened?" Margaret asked quietly. The young woman had settled beside Beatrice, her face flushed from the heat. "A little," Beatrice admitted, "though I suppose being stranded is better than the axle breaking while we were moving at full speed. I try not to think about that." Margaret smiled, though it was shaky. "Thomas says I worry too much, but this land feels so big, so empty." "It does," Beatrice agreed. "Where are you headed?" "Santa Rosa. Thomas's brother has land there. He says the soil is good for grazing and there is water. We are going to help him with his ranch." Margaret's eyes brightened when she spoke of her husband's plans. "What about you?" "I am going to teach school there." "Oh, how wonderful. Are you from the East, Philadelphia?" "That is a long way to come." Margaret's curiosity was evident, but she was too polite to ask the obvious question that hung in the air. Beatrice was saved from having to deflect by Henry Morton's sudden shout. "Riders coming." They all stood quickly, shading their eyes to look where he pointed. A cloud of dust rose in the distance, moving toward them. Beatrice felt her heart quicken. The driver had said not to expect him back until nightfall, and he would be coming from the opposite direction. As the riders drew closer, Beatrice counted 3 of them, moving at an easy lope. They were still too far away to make out details, but something about the way Thomas Brennan moved protectively in front of his wife made her nervous. "Should we hide?" Mrs. Patterson whispered. "Where?" Henry Morton gestured at the flat, open terrain around them. "Besides, running would only make us look guilty of something." The riders slowed as they approached, and Beatrice got her first clear look at them. 3 men on horseback, dressed in the rough clothes of working ranchers. The man in the lead sat tall in his saddle, his broad-brimmed hat shading his face. As they came to a stop a respectful distance away, he pushed the hat back, and Beatrice found herself looking into the most striking pair of gray eyes she had ever seen. He was perhaps in his early 30s, with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that needed cutting. His face was all strong lines and sharp angles, weathered by sun and wind. He had the build of a man who made his living through hard physical labor, broad-shouldered and lean. But it was his eyes that held her attention. They were intelligent and assessing, taking in the broken stagecoach and stranded passengers with quick efficiency. "Looks like you folks have had some trouble," he said, his voice a low drawl that somehow made even that simple observation sound warm. "Broken axle," Henry Morton explained. "Driver went for help." The man nodded and dismounted with fluid grace, his 2 companions following suit. Now that they were closer, Beatrice could see that one was younger, barely out of his teens, with an eager expression. The other was older, perhaps 50, with a weathered face and knowing eyes. "Name is Austin Abbott," the first man said, addressing them all, but somehow Beatrice felt like his gaze lingered on her a fraction longer than necessary. "This is my ranch hand, Samuel, and my foreman, Jack. We run cattle about 3 miles north of here. Thomas Brennan." The young husband stepped forward to shake hands. "My wife, Margaret, Mrs. Patterson, Miss Garrison, and Mr. Morton." Austin Abbott's eyes definitely focused on Beatrice when her name was mentioned. She felt an unexpected warmth creep up her neck and told herself it was just the sun. "We saw the coach from the North Ridge," Jack, the older foreman, explained. "Figured something was wrong when it was not moving." "The driver has gone to the way station," Mrs. Patterson said. "He told us to wait here." Austin walked around the coach, examining the broken axle. He crouched down for a better look, and Beatrice found herself noticing the capable way he moved, the certainty in his actions. He straightened and shook his head. "That is not getting fixed quickly. You will be here past dark, maybe longer. Way station is not exactly well supplied." He looked at the sun, gauging the time, then back at his foreman. "Jack, what do you think?" "I think these folks would be more comfortable at the ranch house than sitting out here roasting," Jack said. "My thought too." Austin turned back to the passengers. "My ranch is not far. You are welcome to wait there. When the driver returns, he will see our tracks and know where you went. We can leave a note too to be certain." "That is very kind," Thomas Brennan said, "but we would not want to impose." "No imposition. I have a housekeeper who would skin me alive if she knew I left ladies sitting in the sun when we had shelter to offer." Austin smiled when he said it, and the expression transformed his serious face into something genuinely handsome. "We have food, water, and shade." "Much better than here." Beatrice knew she should keep quiet, let the men make the decision, but the thought of sitting beside this broken coach for hours more in the increasing heat made her speak up. "I think it sounds like a good idea." Austin's eyes met hers, and for a moment something passed between them. Recognition, perhaps, though of what she could not say. "Well then," he said, his voice somehow softer, "let us get you folks somewhere comfortable." The young ranch hand, Samuel, rode back to get a wagon while the rest of them gathered what luggage they could easily carry. Austin moved among them with quiet efficiency, helping Mrs. Patterson with her bags, offering his canteen to Margaret when she looked faint from the heat. He was courteous to everyone, but Beatrice noticed that he seemed to find reasons to speak directly to her. "Is this all your luggage, Miss Garrison?" he asked, gesturing to her 2 trunks. "Yes, I travel light." It was not entirely a joke. She had left most of her life behind in Philadelphia. "Smart. Too many people try to bring everything and end up losing half of it on the trail." He lifted one of her trunks with ease. "What brings you to New Mexico Territory, a teaching position, in Santa Rosa?" His eyebrows rose slightly. "The school there." "I know they have been looking for someone. Then I hope I do not disappoint them." "Something tells me you would not disappoint anyone, Miss Garrison." The way he said it, direct and sincere, made her breath catch slightly. She was not used to such straightforward attention, not after months of people avoiding her gaze back home. Samuel returned with a sturdy wagon, and they loaded the luggage. Mrs. Patterson and Margaret were helped onto the wagon seat, while the men would ride. Austin looked at Beatrice. "You can ride in the wagon if you prefer, but if you know how to sit a horse, you are welcome to ride with me. It is more comfortable than that hard bench." Beatrice had learned to ride as a girl, though it had been years. The thought of sitting primly in the wagon, jolting over every rock, versus the freedom of being on horseback made the decision easy. "I can ride." Austin's smile was approving. He went to his horse, a large bay gelding, and swung into the saddle, then reached down for her. "Put your foot on mine and take my hand." She did as instructed, and with surprising ease he lifted her up to sit sideways in front of him. It was unconventional, certainly improper by Philadelphia standards, but this was not Philadelphia. His arm came around her waist to hold the reins, and she was suddenly very aware of his closeness, the solid warmth of him at her back. "Hold on," he said quietly, his breath stirring the hair near her ear. They set off at an easy walk, the wagon following behind. The ranch hands took the lead, and Jack rode alongside the wagon, keeping up a steady stream of conversation with the passengers there. That left Beatrice and Austin in a bubble of relative privacy. "So," he said after a few minutes of silence, "Philadelphia to New Mexico territory. That is quite a change." "It is," she agreed, not elaborating, running from something or toward something. The question was too perceptive. She stiffened slightly. "Does it matter? I suppose not. We all have our reasons for being where we are." He paused. "For what it is worth, Santa Rosa is a good town, growing fast. The railroad is supposed to come through in the next few years, which will change things. Change for the better, some yes, some no. Progress always costs something, but there are good people there. They will treat you fair if you treat them the same." They rode in silence for a while, and Beatrice found herself relaxing against him despite herself. The landscape rolled past, beautiful and stark. A hawk circled overhead, riding the thermals. In the distance, she could see what looked like a line of green following a watercourse. "That is my land starting there," Austin said, pointing. "Follows the creek for about 5 miles. Not the biggest ranch, but it is mine. Built it up from nothing over the past 10 years. There was pride in his voice, the kind that came from real accomplishment. "You started it yourself, my brother and I. He died 4 years back, thrown from a horse." The words were matter of fact, but she heard the old grief underneath. "After that, it was just me. I have good people working for me, but it is my name on the deed. I am sorry about your brother." "Thank you. Andrew was a good man. He would have liked seeing the place now. We have close to 300 head of cattle, good water, decent grazing. It is not easy, but it is honest work." The way he spoke about his ranch with such obvious care told her much about the man. This was someone who valued what he had built, who took responsibility seriously. "You have family back east?" he asked. "Not really. My parents passed several years ago. I have some distant cousins, but we were never close." It was easier to say than she expected. Perhaps because he was a stranger, because after today she might never see him again. "So you really are starting fresh, completely? That takes courage." She let out a small, humorless laugh. "Or desperation. Sometimes they are the same thing." His arm tightened fractionally around her waist as the horse navigated around a cluster of rocks. "Either way, you are here now. That is what counts." They crested a low rise, and Beatrice saw the ranch spread out below them. It was larger than she had expected. A 2-story house built of adobe and wood stood at the center, with a wide porch wrapping around at least 2 sides. There were several outbuildings, including a large barn, corrals with horses, and in the distance, she could see cattle grazing along the creek bottom. It looked established, prosperous, and somehow welcoming. "Welcome to the Abbott Ranch," Austin said, and she heard the pride in his voice again. As they rode into the yard, a woman emerged from the house, wiping her hands on her apron. She was perhaps 60, with steel-gray hair pulled back in a severe bun, but her face creased into a smile when she saw them. "Austin Abbott, what have you brought home now?" she called out. "Stranded travelers, Rosa. The stagecoach broke down on the main road." He dismounted and then helped Beatrice down, his hands strong and steady on her waist. "This is Miss Garrison, Mrs. Patterson, Mrs. Brennan and her husband Thomas, and Mr. Morton. Folks, this is Rosa Martinez, my housekeeper and the person who really runs this place." "Nonsense," Rosa said, but she was smiling. Come in, come in. You all look half dead from the heat. I have cool water and food." The interior of the house was a welcome relief from the sun. The thick adobe walls kept the rooms pleasantly cool. The main room was large and simply furnished but comfortable, with a stone fireplace at one end and windows that let in light without the heat. Everything was clean and well maintained. Rosa bustled around, settling Mrs. Patterson in the most comfortable chair, getting water for everyone, directing Samuel to help with the luggage. Austin stood by the fireplace, watching it all with obvious affection for his housekeeper's efficiency. "Rosa has been with my family since I was a boy," he explained to Beatrice, who had somehow ended up standing near him. "When Andrew and I started the ranch, she insisted on coming with us. I would have given up a dozen times without her." "I heard that," Rosa called from where she was helping Margaret, "and it is true." Despite everything, Beatrice found herself smiling. There was something warm and genuine about this place, these people. It was so different from the cold formality of the social circle she had left behind. "Miss Garrison is going to be the new teacher in Santa Rosa," Austin told Rosa. The housekeeper's face lit up. "Finally! Those children need a proper education. The last teacher left 6 months ago and they have been running wild." "I will do my best," Beatrice said. "I am sure you will do wonderfully." Rosa studied her with shrewd eyes. "You have the look of someone with sense. That is more important than any fancy degree." Jack and Samuel came in with the last of the luggage. "Stage driver will probably not be back until late tonight," Jack said to Austin. "We should send someone to show him the way here." "I will go," Samuel volunteered eagerly. "Take a lantern. It will be dark before you know it." Austin looked at his guests. "You are all welcome to stay the night. We have rooms enough and it makes no sense to move you again in the dark." "We could not possibly impose that much," Mrs. Patterson protested, but her voice lacked conviction. "It is no imposition. Rosa loves having guests and the rooms are just sitting empty otherwise." Austin looked around at them all. "Please, stay. You will be much more comfortable, and in the morning we can get you sorted out with transportation to Santa Rosa." Thomas and Margaret exchanged glances, then Thomas nodded. "If you are certain, then thank you. We accept." The others agreed, and Rosa clapped her hands together. "Good. I will make a proper meal. Austin, show them where they can wash up and rest. Dinner will be in 2 hours." Beatrice found herself in a small but comfortable bedroom on the 2nd floor. The window looked out over the creek and the grazing cattle beyond. Someone, probably Rosa, had already brought her trunks up. There was a basin with fresh water, clean towels, and even a bar of soap that smelled faintly of lavender. She washed the dust from her face and hands, then sat on the bed, suddenly overwhelmed. This morning she had been on a stagecoach, resigned to whatever awaited her in Santa Rosa. Now she was in the home of a rancher named Austin Abbott, a man whose gray eyes seemed to see more than she wanted to reveal, and she felt more at ease than she had in months. It was dangerous, this comfort. She had come here to start over alone, to rely on no one but herself. Getting attached to a place or a person would only complicate things. And yet, when Austin had smiled at her, when his arm had held her steady on the horse, she had felt something shift inside her. Something she had thought broken after her disastrous engagement. A knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. "Miss Garrison, it is Austin. I wanted to make sure you had everything you need." She opened the door. He had washed up as well, his dark hair damp, his sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms. He looked younger somehow, less stern. "I have everything, thank you. This is very kind. Just neighborly. That is how we do things out here." He leaned against the doorframe, making no move to leave. "Rosa is making enough food to feed an army. She gets excited when she has people to cook for. She seems wonderful. She is. When my parents died, she was the one who held things together for Andrew and me. We were just boys, really. She made sure we did not starve or completely run wild." He paused. "I know today did not go as you planned, but I hope it has not soured you on New Mexico territory. Not at all. If anything, it has shown me that there is kindness here." She met his eyes directly. "Thank you, Austin." The way she said his name, the first time she had used it, seemed to please him. His expression softened. "You are very welcome, Beatrice." Hearing her name in his low drawl did strange things to her heartbeat. They stood there for a moment, something unspoken passing between them, until Rosa's voice calling from downstairs broke the spell. "I should let you rest," Austin said, straightening. "Dinner will be ready soon." He left, and Beatrice closed the door, leaning against it. Her heart was racing in a way that had nothing to do with the heat or the long journey. She barely knew this man, and yet something about him drew her in. It was foolish, dangerous. She had come here to escape complications, not find new ones. But as she changed into a fresh dress and pinned up her hair, she could not stop thinking about gray eyes and a gentle smile. Dinner was a lively affair. Rosa had indeed made enough food for an army, bringing out platters of beef, beans, fresh bread, and vegetables from her garden. They ate at a long table in the dining room, and the conversation flowed easily. Thomas and Austin talked about ranching and farming. Margaret and Rosa discussed recipes. Mrs. Patterson shared stories of her travels. Henry Morton, the salesman, entertained them with tales of his various misadventures on the road. Beatrice found herself relaxing, laughing at the stories, feeling more at home than she had in a long time. Austin sat at the head of the table, and she noticed how he drew people out, asking questions, listening with genuine interest. He was a natural leader, but not in an overbearing way. People simply seemed to want to follow him. Several times during the meal, she caught him watching her. Not in an uncomfortable way, but with an expression of curiosity and something else she could not quite name. Each time their eyes met, she felt that strange flutter in her chest again. After dinner, they moved to the porch to catch the evening breeze. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that seemed impossible. The air smelled of dust and sage and something green from the creek. Austin brought out coffee, and they sat in comfortable chairs watching the light fade. Mrs. Patterson and Margaret had retired early, exhausted from the day. Thomas and Henry were inside with Jack, looking at maps and discussing routes. That left Beatrice and Austin alone on the porch, Rosa having disappeared to her own quarters. "It is beautiful here," Beatrice said softly. "I have never seen a sky like this. Wait until you see the stars. No city lights to dim them. Some nights it looks like you could reach up and touch them." He sipped his coffee. "It took me a while to adjust when I first came out here. The space, the silence. I kept waiting for something to happen, for there to be noise and crowds. But after a while I realized the silence is not empty. It is full of things if you know how to listen." "What kinds of things?" "The wind in the grass, coyotes calling, cattle settling for the night, the creek running. It all has its own rhythm." He looked at her. "Does that sound foolish?" "No, it sounds peaceful." They sat quietly for a while, and she found that he was right. As the darkness deepened, sounds emerged, the distant lowing of cattle, the chirp of crickets, a soft rustling in the brush nearby. And above it all, the whisper of wind across the open land. "Can I ask you something?" Austin said eventually. "You can ask." "What are you running from?" She should have been offended by the directness, but somehow she was not. Maybe it was the darkness that made it easier to talk. Maybe it was the sense that this man would understand. "A scandal that was not my fault but stained me anyway," she said quietly. "My fiancé was a liar and a cheat. When I discovered it and ended our engagement, his creditors came after me. I had done nothing wrong, but in society's eyes I was damaged goods. People I thought were friends turned away. I could not walk down the street without whispers following me. So you left." "So I left." She looked at her hands clasped around her coffee cup. "I have no desire to ever marry now. I just want to teach to have a quiet life, to be left alone. That seems like a lonely future. Perhaps, but it is safe." Austin was quiet for a long moment. Not all men are liars and cheats, Beatrice. I know that intellectually, but trusting that knowledge. She shook her head. It is harder than it should be. I understand. My brother died because he trusted a horse that had always been steady. One day it just spooked and threw him. After that, I questioned everything, wondered if I could trust my own judgment. It took time, but eventually I realized that living in fear is not really living at all. How did you get past it? I decided that I would rather take risks and fail than never try at all. The ranch could have failed a dozen times. There were droughts and hard winters and cattle disease. But I kept trying because the alternative was giving up, and that was not who I wanted to be. She looked at him in the growing darkness. You are a brave man, Austin Abbott. Not brave, just stubborn, he smiled. And maybe a little bit hopeful that things will work out if you put in the effort. The stars were coming out now, brilliant points of light scattered across the black sky. Beatrice had never seen so many. The Milky Way stretched overhead like a river of light. Oh, she breathed. You were right. I feel like I could touch them. Wait. Austin stood and held out his hand. Come with me. She hesitated only a moment before taking his hand and letting him lead her down the porch steps and out into the yard. Away from the house, the darkness was complete except for the starlight. He stopped and tilted his head back. Now look. She did, and the view was even more spectacular. The stars seemed to encompass everything, wrapping around them. She felt small and somehow perfectly placed at the same time. I come out here sometimes when I need to think, Austin said quietly. It helps put things in perspective. Whatever problems I have, they seem smaller under all that sky. They stood together, not touching but close enough that she was aware of him beside her. The moment felt suspended, separate from time. Beatrice could not remember the last time she had felt this peaceful, this present. Thank you for this, she whispered. For all of it, the rescue, the hospitality, this. You are welcome. He turned to look at her, and even in the darkness she could feel the intensity of his gaze. Beatrice, I know we just met. I know you have no reason to trust me or any man. But I want you to know that if you ever need anything, help of any kind, you can come to me. No strings, no expectations. Just one human being helping another. The sincerity in his voice made her throat tight. Why would you do that for a stranger? Because you are not really a stranger, are you? Sometimes you meet someone and you just know they are going to matter. I knew it the moment I saw you standing by that broken stagecoach. Her breath caught. Austin. I am not asking for anything, he said quickly. I know you have had enough of men making demands. I just wanted you to know. Whatever happens, wherever you go, you have a friend here, a friend. It was such a simple word, but the way he said it felt like more, like a promise, like a beginning. I would like that, she said softly. A friend. They walked back to the house together, and at the door he took her hand briefly. Sleep well, Beatrice. Tomorrow is a new day. In her room, Beatrice lay awake long after she should have been asleep. Her mind kept replaying the day, but especially the evening, the conversation on the porch. The stars. The way Austin had looked at her with such open honesty. She had meant what she said about not wanting to marry, about wanting a quiet, independent life. But something was shifting inside her, old fears cracking like ice in spring. Austin made her want to reconsider, to imagine possibilities she had thought closed to her forever. It was too soon, too fast. She barely knew him, and yet her heart seemed to have its own ideas about what was sensible. She finally drifted off to sleep with the memory of starlight and gray eyes following her into dreams. Morning came with the smell of coffee and bacon drifting up from the kitchen. Beatrice dressed and made her way downstairs to find the others already gathered around the breakfast table. Austin was there, freshly shaved, looking alert despite what must have been an early start to his day. "The stage driver came through last night," he explained as she sat down. "The way station sent a wagon. They are working on the coach repairs, but it will be at least 2 more days before it is road-worthy." "So what do we do?" Thomas asked. "I am taking you all to Santa Rosa in my wagon. It is only about 15 miles. We can be there by noon." Austin looked at each of them. "Unless anyone wants to wait here for the coach." They all agreed that the wagon was the better option. No one wanted to spend 2 more days idle, no matter how comfortable the accommodations. Breakfast was another hearty meal courtesy of Rosa, who kept refilling plates and cups with the determination of someone who believed empty stomachs were a personal failing. Afterward, the men loaded luggage while the ladies prepared for the journey. Rosa pulled Beatrice aside as she was putting on her traveling hat. "That man looks at you like you are the sunrise," she said without preamble. Beatrice felt her cheeks heat. "We barely know each other." "Sometimes knowing takes years, sometimes it takes minutes." "I knew my husband was the one for me within an hour of meeting him. We had 43 years together before he died." Rosa's eyes were kind. "I am not saying you should throw caution away, but do not throw away a chance at happiness either because you are afraid." "How did you know about that?" "I have eyes, and Austin talked to me this morning. He did not say much, but I know that boy, he is smitten." She patted Beatrice's hand. "Just think about it. A good man is hard to find. One who looks at you the way he does is even rarer." The wagon was large enough for all of them and their luggage. Austin drove with Thomas beside him up front. The ladies sat in the back on benches Austin had installed, with the luggage secured behind them. It was far more comfortable than the stagecoach had been. They set off under a brilliant blue sky, the morning still relatively cool. The road to Santa Rosa followed the creek for several miles before cutting across open grassland. Austin kept up a steady commentary, pointing out landmarks, explaining the terrain. He was clearly proud of this land, and his knowledge of it was deep. "That ridge there is the eastern boundary of my property," he said, gesturing. "Beyond that is open range, though the Mercer family has been trying to claim it for years. We have had some disputes, but nothing too serious." "What kind of disputes?" Henry Morton asked. "Boundary lines mostly. They think they own more than they do, and occasionally some of my cattle wander onto what they consider their land, but we work it out." Austin's voice was level, but Beatrice sensed there was more to the story. They stopped at midday to rest the horses and eat the lunch Rosa had packed. They found shade under a stand of cottonwoods near the creek, and Austin unhitched the team to let them drink and graze. Beatrice found herself walking along the creek bank, drawn by the sound of running water. It was peaceful here, the gentle burble of the stream over rocks, the rustle of leaves overhead. She bent to trail her fingers in the cool water. "Beautiful, is it not?" Austin had come up behind her, quiet on his feet. "It is. I could sit here for hours. I did as a boy. Andrew and I would spend whole afternoons by creeks like this one, fishing or just throwing rocks." He smiled at the memory. "Simpler times. Do you ever wish you could go back?" "Sometimes. But mostly I am grateful for where I am now. The past shapes us, but we do not have to live there." He looked at her meaningfully. "The future is where the interesting things happen." They stood together by the water, and Beatrice felt the pull between them growing stronger. It would be so easy to let herself fall, to trust this man who seemed too good to be true. But the scars from her past held her back, kept her cautious. "Austin, I need to be honest with you," she said quietly. "I am not sure I can be what you seem to want me to be." "And what is that?" "Someone who is ready to trust, to open up, to take a chance." She met his eyes. "I am broken in ways that might not be fixable." "I do not think you are broken. I think you are healing, and that takes time." He took a step closer. Beatrice, I am not asking you to decide anything today or tomorrow or even next month. I am just asking you to stay open to the possibility. Can you do that? She wanted to say no to protect herself, but looking into those honest gray eyes, she found herself nodding. I can try. That is all I ask. They rejoined the others, and soon they were back on the road. The landscape began to change as they neared Santa Rosa. More houses appeared, scattered farms, other travelers on the road. The town itself came into view just before noon, a collection of adobe and wooden buildings clustered around a central plaza. Santa Rosa was larger than Beatrice had expected. The main street boasted several shops, a hotel, a church, and what looked like a new brick building that Austin explained was the bank. People moved along the wooden sidewalks, and children played in the dusty street. It looked prosperous and established, a real town rather than just a frontier outpost. Austin pulled the wagon up in front of the hotel. This is the best place to stay while you get settled, he told them. Mrs. Henderson, who runs it, is honest and keeps clean rooms. He helped each of them down, and Beatrice noticed how he lingered when it was her turn, his hands staying on her waist a moment longer than necessary. The school is 2 streets over, he said to her. The superintendent is Charles Patterson. You should call on him this afternoon to let him know you have arrived. Thank you for everything. It was my pleasure. He looked like he wanted to say more but was conscious of the others nearby. Will you let me call on you to see how you are settling in? It was forward, presumptuous even. Any proper lady would refuse, but Beatrice found herself saying, yes, I would like that. His smile was worth any breach of propriety. They unloaded the luggage, and Austin made sure everyone knew where they were going and had what they needed. He was thorough and thoughtful, seeing to every detail. Finally, with promises to check on them all in a few days, he climbed back into the wagon and set off down the street. Beatrice watched him go, feeling an unexpected pang of loss. It was ridiculous. She had known him less than 24 hours, but already she missed his steady presence, his quiet strength. Well, Margaret said beside her, that is quite a man. Yes, Beatrice agreed softly. Yes, he is. The next few days passed in a blur of activity. Beatrice met with Charles Patterson, a kindly man in his 60s who was delighted to finally have a qualified teacher. The schoolhouse was a simple building with one large room, a wood stove for heat, and windows that let in plenty of light. There were about 20 students of various ages, he explained, from children just learning their letters to teenagers needing more advanced instruction. The last teacher could not handle the older boys, Patterson admitted. They ran roughshod over her until she gave up and left. But you seem made of sterner stuff. Beatrice assured him she could maintain discipline. She had dealt with difficult students during her practice teaching in Philadelphia. Rural teenagers could not be worse than bored society girls. She was given a small house behind the church, just 2 rooms but clean and private. The town council provided basic furniture, and several women from the church arrived with household goods and food to help her settle in. They were warm and welcoming, curious about her but not prying. We are so glad you are here, one woman, Mrs. Chen, said as she helped Beatrice arrange her kitchen. My son needs proper schooling if he is to make something of himself. Another woman, younger with a baby on her hip, added, and the girls too. I want my daughter to have opportunities I never had. Their hopes for their children touched Beatrice deeply. She was determined not to disappoint them. On her 3rd evening in Santa Rosa, there was a knock at her door. She opened it to find Austin standing there, hat in hand, looking somehow both confident and nervous. I hope I am not calling too late, he said. Not at all. Please come in. Her little house was modest, especially compared to his ranch, but she had made it homelike with some fabric curtains and a few personal items. Austin looked around with obvious interest. "It suits you," he said. "Cozy. Can I offer you coffee? I am afraid I do not have much else." Coffee would be fine. They sat at her small table, and the domesticity of the scene struck Beatrice. How natural it felt to have him here in her space. How right it seemed. "I wanted to see how you were settling in," Austin said, "and to make sure you had everything you needed. Everyone has been very kind. I start teaching on Monday, and I am both excited and terrified. You will be wonderful. Those children are lucky to have you." He wrapped his hands around his coffee cup. "Beatrice, I have been thinking about what you said. About not being ready for anything complicated. I want to respect that, but I also do not want to lose the chance to know you better. What are you suggesting? Spend time with me. Let me court you properly. No pressure, no expectations of where it leads. Just two people getting to know each other." He met her eyes. "I promise to go at whatever pace you need." It was exactly what she needed to hear, not demands or assumptions, but patience and respect. "I would like that," she said quietly, "but slowly. As slow as you need." They talked for over an hour about everything and nothing. Austin told her more about his ranch, the challenges and rewards of the life he had built. She told him about her childhood in Philadelphia, her parents, her love of teaching. They discovered shared interests in books, though his reading leaned toward practical agricultural texts while hers was more literary. They both loved music but rarely had the chance to hear it. When he finally left, he took her hand at the door. "Thank you for giving me a chance." "Thank you for being worth the chance," she replied. He smiled and touched her cheek gently before turning to leave. Beatrice watched him mount his horse and ride off into the darkness, her heart beating faster than it should. The following weeks fell into a pattern. Beatrice threw herself into teaching, and to her relief and pride, the children responded well. Even the older boys, who had reportedly been troublemakers, seemed willing to learn when given material that challenged them. She kept discipline firm but fair, and gradually won their respect. Austin came to town twice a week, timing his visits to coincide with errands or cattle business. But everyone knew he was really coming to see the new school teacher. They would have dinner at the hotel restaurant, or take walks around the plaza, or sit on her small porch in the evenings talking. Slowly, carefully, Beatrice felt her walls coming down. Austin never pushed, never demanded more than she was ready to give. He listened when she talked about her past, offering comfort without pity. He shared his own struggles and doubts, showing her his vulnerable side. And gradually, almost without her realizing it, she began to trust him. One Sunday, 6 weeks after her arrival, Austin invited her to the ranch for the day. "Rosa wants to see you," he said. "She asks about you every time I come home, and I thought you might enjoy getting out of town." Beatrice agreed, and he came to collect her in the wagon early that morning. The ride to the ranch was familiar now, and they talked easily, comfortable with each other in a way that felt earned. Rosa greeted Beatrice with a fierce hug. "Finally." "I told Austin he was being too cautious, waiting so long to bring you back here." "I wanted to give her time to settle in," Austin protested. "Nonsense. You were worried she would say no." Rosa winked at Beatrice. "Come, I made your favorite biscuits." They spent the day at the ranch, and Beatrice was struck by how much it felt like coming home. Austin showed her improvements he had made, introducing her to new horses, pointing out calves born since her last visit. They rode out along the creek, and he taught her to spot signs of wildlife in the dust and grass. At one point they stopped on a ridge overlooking the valley. The ranch was laid out below them, peaceful in the afternoon sun. "I love this place," Austin said quietly. but lately I have been thinking it feels incomplete." "Incomplete how?" He turned to look at her. "It is just me here. Oh, I have the ranch hands and Rosa, and they are family in their own way, but there is no one to share it with, no one to build a future with." Beatrice's heart began to race. "Austin, I know," you said slowly. "I know you are not ready for promises, but I need you to know where my heart is, Beatrice. I am falling in love with you. Maybe I have been since I first saw you, and I hope, that you might feel something for me too." She could deny it, could retreat behind her walls. But looking at him, seeing the hope and fear in his eyes, she could not lie. "I do feel something," she admitted. "More than I thought I could feel again. But Austin, I am still afraid. What if I am wrong again? What if I trust you and you turn out to be someone different than I think? Then you deal with it. But Beatrice, I am not him. I am not the man who hurt you. I would never gamble with your trust or your heart." He reached out and took her hand. "I cannot promise perfection. I will make mistakes. But I can promise honesty and loyalty and doing my best every single day to be worthy of you." Tears stung her eyes. "I want to believe that." "Then believe it. Take the leap. Trust me." He squeezed her hand. "I am not asking you to marry me today, but I am asking you to let yourself love me. To see where this could go." She looked down at their joined hands, then out at the valley below. This place, this man, had become precious to her. The thought of walking away, of protecting herself by denying what she felt, suddenly seemed like the greater risk. "All right," she whispered. "All right. All right, you will let yourself love me." "Yes." She looked up at him, letting him see the truth in her eyes. "I think I already do." His smile was radiant. He pulled her gently into his arms, and she went willingly, letting herself relax against his chest. They stood like that for a long moment, holding each other on the ridge with the whole valley spread below them. "I will never give you reason to regret this," he murmured into her hair. "I know," she said, and meant it. When he kissed her, soft and sweet and full of promise, Beatrice felt the last of her fears melt away. This was real. This was worth the risk. This was the fresh start she had been looking for, better than anything she had imagined. They rode back to the ranch house hand in hand. Rosa took one look at their faces and smiled knowingly. "About time," was all she said, but she pulled Beatrice aside later and whispered, "You have made him happier than I have seen him in years. Thank you." "He has done the same for me," Beatrice replied. The next few months were the happiest of Beatrice's life. She continued teaching, growing more confident and skilled. Her students thrived under her guidance, and parents often stopped her in town to thank her for the difference she was making. The school board was so pleased they voted to increase her salary and promised funds for more books. But it was her time with Austin that made everything perfect. They courted properly, under the watchful eyes of the whole town, but everyone could see they were meant for each other. He came to town at least twice a week, and every Sunday she went to the ranch. They talked about everything, learning each other's thoughts and dreams. Austin wanted to expand the ranch, maybe buy the adjacent land if it came available. He talked about breeding better cattle, about improvements to the house, about a future that slowly began to include her in concrete ways. Beatrice found herself imagining that future. She still loved teaching, but the idea of making a home with Austin, of building a life together on the ranch, became increasingly appealing. One evening in late October, nearly 4 months after they met, Austin drove her back from the ranch as usual. But instead of taking her straight home, he stopped the wagon on the same ridge where they had first acknowledged their feelings. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and red. The air had a crisp edge to it, the first hint of winter approaching. "I have something to ask you," Austin said, his voice steady, but she could hear the nervousness underneath. Beatrice felt her heart begin to pound. "All right." He climbed down from the wagon and came around to help her down. Then, to her shock and joy, he dropped to one knee. "Beatrice Garrison, I know we have not known each other long by some standards, but I have never been more certain of anything in my life. You are the best thing that has ever happened to me. You make me laugh. You challenge me to be better. You see me as I truly am and somehow love me anyway." He pulled a ring from his pocket, a simple gold band with a small diamond that caught the fading light. "Will you marry me? Will you share this ranch and this life with me? Will you let me spend the rest of my days trying to make you as happy as you make me?" Tears streamed down her face, but she was smiling. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking with emotion. "Yes, Austin, I will marry you." He stood and slipped the ring on her finger, then pulled her into his arms and kissed her deeply. She kissed him back with all the love and hope and joy she felt, no longer afraid, no longer holding back. "I love you," she whispered against his lips. "I love you too," he replied. "So much." They stood together on the ridge, holding each other as the sun set and the stars began to emerge. Beatrice thought back to the frightened, wounded woman who had sat on that broken stagecoach just a few months ago. She had come west to start over alone, to hide from the world and nurse her wounds. Instead, she had found Austin. She had found love. She had found home. They were married in December, in the small church in Santa Rosa. The whole town turned out for the wedding. Rosa cried through the entire ceremony. The school children presented them with a quilt they had made, each square decorated with their drawings and well wishes. Margaret and Thomas Brennan came, their own farm starting to prosper. Mrs. Patterson attended with her daughter's family. Even Henry Morton, the salesman, made a point to pass through Santa Rosa for the occasion. Beatrice wore a simple white dress that she had sewn herself with help from several women in town. Austin wore his best suit, looking handsome and slightly uncomfortable in the formal clothes. But when she walked down the aisle and saw the love shining in his eyes, everything else fell away. They spoke their vows in clear, strong voices. Austin promised to love and cherish her, to be faithful and true. Beatrice promised the same, meaning every word with her whole heart. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Austin kissed her to the cheers and applause of everyone gathered. Beatrice kissed him back, feeling like the luckiest woman alive. The reception was held at the hotel, with food and music and dancing. Beatrice danced with her new husband, swaying to the fiddle music, laughing when he stepped on her toes. "I am not much of a dancer," he apologized. "I do not care," she said, smiling up at him. "This is perfect." Late that night they drove back to the ranch, now truly her home. Rosa had decorated the house with candles and flowers before discreetly retiring to her own quarters. Austin carried Beatrice over the threshold, and she laughed at the old-fashioned gesture. "Starting as I mean to go on," he said, setting her gently on her feet. "Taking care of you." "We will take care of each other," she corrected. That night, as her husband held her close, Beatrice marveled at how much her life had changed. She had come to New Mexico territory broken and afraid, looking only to survive. Instead, she had found love, belonging, and a future brighter than any she had dared to imagine. The first year of their marriage was an adjustment, learning to blend two lives into one. Beatrice continued teaching through the school year, riding into town 3 days a week while Austin handled the ranch. They quickly established routines and rhythms that worked for them. In the summer, when school was out, Beatrice spent more time at the ranch. She learned the business side of ranching, helping Austin with accounts and correspondence. She also took over much of the vegetable garden from Rosa, finding unexpected joy in coaxing food from the earth. The ranch hands, initially uncertain about having a woman as their boss's wife, soon came to respect and like her. She treated them fairly, remembered their names and stories, and never put on airs. Jack, the foreman, told Austin privately that she was the best thing that had ever happened to him. In their second year of marriage, Beatrice discovered she was pregnant. The joy on Austin's face when she told him was something she would never forget. "A baby," he kept saying, as if he could not quite believe it. "We are going to have a baby." He became even more protective of her, worrying constantly about her health and comfort. She found it endearing even when it became excessive. "I am pregnant, not made of glass," she told him when he tried to prevent her from riding into town to teach. "I just want you to be safe, both of you." She softened, taking his face in her hands. "We are safe. I promise to be careful, but I am not giving up teaching until I have to." She taught until her 7th month, when the school board gently suggested she should rest. One of the older students, a young woman planning to become a teacher herself, took over for the remainder of the term. Their son was born on a warm May evening, coming into the world with a lusty cry that announced his presence to everyone in the house. Austin held Beatrice's hand through the whole labor, refusing to leave even when Rosa suggested he might be more comfortable waiting outside. "I am not leaving her," he said firmly. When the midwife finally placed the baby in Beatrice's arms, she looked down at the tiny red face and felt her heart expand in ways she had not known were possible. The baby had Austin's dark hair, and when he opened them, his gray eyes. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "Welcome to the world." Austin sat beside her on the bed, his arm around her shoulders, looking down at their son with wonder. "He is perfect. You are perfect." He kissed her temple. "Thank you." They named him Andrew after Austin's late brother. When they told Rosa, she cried and said it was the perfect tribute. Andrew was a good baby, healthy and generally content. Austin proved to be a devoted father, getting up for midnight feedings, changing diapers without complaint, spending hours just holding his son and staring at him in amazement. "I never knew I could love someone this much," he told Beatrice one night as they watched Andrew sleep in his cradle. "Except you, of course." "Of course," she teased, but she understood. The love she felt for their son was different from her love for Austin, but no less powerful. The ranch continued to prosper. Austin bought the adjacent land when it came up for sale, expanding their grazing area significantly. They hired more hands and increased their herd. Money was not abundant, but they were comfortable and growing more secure each year. Beatrice returned to teaching when Andrew was 6 months old, bringing him with her. Rosa watched him during the day while Beatrice taught, and it worked well. The students loved having a baby around, and Andrew seemed to enjoy all the attention. When Andrew was 2, Beatrice became pregnant again. This time they had a daughter, Emma, who came into the world more quietly than her brother but no less beloved. She had Beatrice's lighter coloring and a temperament that was sunny and sweet. Life fell into a comfortable rhythm. The ranch, the school, the children, their marriage. Everything felt settled and right. Beatrice sometimes thought back to the frightened woman on the broken stagecoach and could barely recognize herself. That woman had been so afraid, so certain she was broken beyond repair. This woman, this Beatrice, was happy and whole and deeply loved. She had a husband who cherished her, children who delighted her, meaningful work, and a home that felt like a piece of heaven on earth. Years passed, each one bringing new challenges and joys. Andrew grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved the ranch and followed his father everywhere. Emma was bright and curious, always asking questions, always wanting to understand how things worked. When she was old enough, Beatrice began teaching her to read, and the girl took to it like she had been born with a book in her hands. They had 2 more children, another son they named Jack after Austin's loyal foreman, and finally a daughter they named Rose after Rosa, who cried for a week when they told her. The ranch grew and prospered. Austin's hard work and smart decisions paid off, and they became one of the most successful ranches in the area. But Austin never lost his down-to-earth nature or his dedication to his family. No matter how busy he was, he always made time for Beatrice and the children. Beatrice taught for 15 years before finally retiring to focus on the ranch and her growing family. By then, she had taught nearly every child in Santa Rosa, and several of her former students had become teachers themselves, carrying on her legacy. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Austin surprised her by taking her back to the ridge where he had proposed. The children stayed with Rosa, giving them a rare evening alone. They stood together looking out over the valley as the sun set, just as they had all those years ago. The ranch had changed, expanded. There were more buildings, more cattle, more signs of prosperity, but the essential beauty of the land remained. "You ever regret it?" Austin asked quietly, "giving up your plans for a quiet, solitary life?" Beatrice looked at him, this man who had won her heart through patience and kindness and unwavering love. His hair was graying at the temples now, and there were lines around his eyes from years of squinting into the sun. But to her, he was as handsome as the day they met. "Not once," she said firmly. "You convinced me to start over with you, and it was the best decision I ever made." "You convinced me that love was worth the risk," he replied. "That opening my heart again after losing Andrew was not something to fear." "We convinced each other," she said, smiling. He pulled her into his arms, and they stood together as they had so many times before, watching the sun paint the sky in brilliant colors. "I love you, Beatrice Abbott." "I love you too, Austin Abbott, always." The years continued to pass, bringing grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Andrew took over more of the ranch operations as Austin grew older, running it with the same care and dedication his father had taught him. Emma became a teacher, following in her mother's footsteps. Jack studied law and opened a practice in Santa Rosa. Little Rose married a rancher from a neighboring spread and gave Beatrice and Austin 6 grandchildren in rapid succession. Through it all, Austin and Beatrice remained devoted to each other. They grew old together, their love deepening with each passing year. They sat on the porch in the evenings, holding hands and watching the sun set, still finding new things to talk about, still making each other laugh. Rosa lived to be 93, sharp and opinionated to the end. When she finally passed peacefully in her sleep, the whole town mourned. They buried her on a hill overlooking the ranch she had helped build, with a headstone that read, "Beloved friend and family." Austin's health began to decline when he was in his 70s. Nothing dramatic, just the slow wearing down of a body that had worked hard for decades. Beatrice nursed him tenderly, just as he had cared for her through 4 pregnancies and various illnesses over the years. "We have had a good life," he told her one evening as they sat together on the porch. His hand was still strong in hers, though spotted with age. "The best life," she agreed. "No regrets?" "Not a single one." "Well, maybe that I did not meet you sooner." He smiled, the same smile that had won her heart all those years ago. "We met exactly when we were supposed to. I truly believe that. You needed to be broken so you could be rebuilt stronger. And I needed to learn patience and faith. We became who we needed to be to make this work." Wise words from my wise husband. I have my moments. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. The same stars they had watched together that first night when he had offered her friendship and she had been too afraid to accept more. The stars that had witnessed their courtship, their wedding, their entire life together. "Thank you," Austin said quietly. "For what?" "For saying yes. For taking a chance on me. For building this life with me. for loving me even when I did not deserve it. You always deserved it, she said fiercely. Always. He raised her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. I am the luckiest man who ever lived, and I am the luckiest woman. Austin Abbott passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 76, with Beatrice holding his hand. The town of Santa Rosa turned out in force for his funeral, testament to the respect and affection he had earned over a lifetime. He was buried on the hill next to Rosa, overlooking the ranch he had built and loved. Beatrice grieved deeply but not despairingly. She had loved him for over 50 years, and while she missed him terribly, she also knew how blessed she had been. Not everyone got a love like theirs. She lived another 7 years, spending her time with her children and grandchildren, all of whom adored her. She told them stories of their grandfather, of the ranch in the early days, of how she had come to New Mexico territory frightened and alone and found everything she had ever needed. When she was 81, Beatrice died quietly while sitting in her favorite chair on the porch, looking out over the valley she had come to love. Andrew found her there, a peaceful expression on her face, her hands folded in her lap. They buried her next to Austin, and the whole town mourned again. The school board voted to name the schoolhouse after her, the Beatrice Abbott School, honoring her decades of service to the children of Santa Rosa. At the funeral, Emma stood and spoke about her mother. She came here with nothing but determination to survive. She left with a legacy of love, family, and community that will endure for generations. She taught us that starting over is not about running away, but about being brave enough to embrace new possibilities. She showed us that love, real love, is worth any risk. The ranch continued in the family, passed down through Andrew and then his children. The Abbott name became synonymous with integrity and quality in that part of New Mexico. And always, the family remembered the story of Austin and Beatrice, the rancher and the teacher who had found each other when both needed it most. Years became decades, and the story took on the quality of legend. Great-great-grandchildren heard about the broken stagecoach, the rescue, the courtship under the stars. They heard how their great-great-grandfather had convinced their great-great-grandmother to start over with him, and how that decision had created the family they all belonged to. The house was preserved, becoming a gathering place for reunions and celebrations. The porch where Austin and Beatrice had spent so many evenings still stood, weathered but solid. Family members liked to sit there in the evenings, watching the same sunsets, looking at the same stars, feeling connected to the love story that had started it all. On the hill where Austin, Beatrice, and Rosa were buried, someone planted roses that bloomed every spring, red and fragrant and resilient. A bench was placed there, and it became a tradition for newly engaged couples in the family to sit there together, looking out over the valley, making their own promises for the future. The schoolhouse that bore Beatrice's name educated generations of children, many of them her own descendants. Teachers came and went, but her influence persisted, a standard of dedication and care that inspired them all. Santa Rosa itself grew and changed, eventually getting the railroad Austin had predicted. It became a prosperous town, a good place to raise families, a community that took care of its own. But even as it modernized, it never forgot its roots or the people who had helped build it. The story of Austin and Beatrice became one of those tales that people told to illustrate what was best about the Old West. Not the gunfights or the lawlessness that often dominated popular imagination, but the quieter story of people building lives, creating community, and finding love in the midst of hardship. It was a story about second chances, about the courage to trust again after being hurt, about the patience to wait for someone to heal. It was about a man who saw past a woman's fear to the strength underneath, and a woman who learned that not all men were the same, that some were worth the risk of vulnerability. Most of all, it was a love story, pure and simple, the kind of love that weathers storms and grows deeper with time. The kind that leaves a legacy not just of children and property, but of an example of what marriage could be at its best. On summer evenings, when the breeze carried the scent of sage across the valley and the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, it was easy to imagine Austin and Beatrice still there, still sitting on the porch, holding hands, watching the sunset over the ranch they built together. Still in love, still grateful for the day a broken stagecoach and a chance meeting changed everything. Their story proved that sometimes the best things in life come not from our plans but from our willingness to deviate from them. Beatrice had set out to start over alone to build a safe, solitary life. Instead, she found partnership, passion, and a love that lasted beyond death. Austin had been content with his ranch, his work, his solitary life. Then a woman with frightened eyes and hidden strength tumbled into his world, and he realized what he had been missing. He had the patience to wait for her, the wisdom to let her come to him at her own pace, and the love to make her feel safe enough to try again. Together, they built something beautiful, not just a successful ranch or a large family, though they had both. They built a partnership based on mutual respect, trust earned through consistent action, and a love that grew richer with every year that passed. Theirs was not a perfect story. They had arguments and disappointments, hard times and losses. But they faced everything together, their bond growing stronger through adversity rather than weaker. They learned each other's strengths and weaknesses, accommodated each other's quirks, and chose each other every single day. The broken stagecoach that had brought them together became a symbol in family lore. Sometimes, the story went, you have to break down before you can find your true path. Sometimes what looks like disaster is actually destiny arranging itself. Beatrice always said that getting stranded that day was the best thing that ever happened to her. If the axle had not broken, she would have gone straight to Santa Rosa, taken up her teaching position, and probably lived a perfectly adequate life. Adequate, but not extraordinary. Not filled with the kind of love and joy she found with Austin. Austin said he had been waiting his whole life for that stagecoach to break down. He just had not known it until he saw Beatrice standing in the dust and knew, with sudden certainty, that she was his future. Two people, both wounded in different ways, both trying to make peace with solitary lives, both convinced they were content with less than they deserved. Then chance or fate or providence brought them together at exactly the right moment, and everything changed. The ranch still stands, well over 100 years after Austin first claimed the land. The creek still runs through the valley, providing water for cattle that carry the Abbott brand. The house has been updated and expanded, but the bones of the original structure remain, along with the porch where so much of Austin and Beatrice's love story unfolded. In the main room, over the fireplace that Austin built with his own hands, hangs a portrait of him and Beatrice painted on their 25th wedding anniversary. They are seated together, his hand on her shoulder, hers covering his. They are looking not at the painter but at each other, and the love in their eyes is unmistakable even across the years. Family members point out that portrait to children and grandchildren, keeping the story alive. They tell about the broken stagecoach, the rescue, the courtship. They tell about how Austin convinced Beatrice to start over with him and how she found the courage to try. They tell about the life they built, the love they shared, the legacy they left. And then they take those children outside onto that porch and they point up at the stars. The same stars Austin showed Beatrice that first night, brilliant and infinite in the black sky. Stars that have watched over the Abbott Ranch for generations, silent witnesses to love stories that echo the first one. That is what love looks like, they say, pointing at those stars. Vast and beautiful and lasting. That is what your great-great-grandparents had. That is what is possible when two people choose each other, trust each other, and build something together. The children listen, absorbing the story, adding it to the collection of family legends that shape who they are. And maybe, when they are older, when they face their own heartbreaks and fears, they will remember. They will remember that taking a chance can lead to something wonderful. That starting over is not failing but choosing to try again. That the right person will wait for you to be ready, will earn your trust through action, will prove day after day that they are worthy of your heart. This is how love stories endure, passing from generation to generation. Not just as tales of what was, but as inspiration for what could be. Austin and Beatrice's story, born from a broken stagecoach and a rancher's kind offer, became a blueprint for what love should be. Patient, respectful, deep, and lasting. They came from different worlds, carrying different wounds. But they met in the middle, in the wide open spaces of New Mexico territory, under skies that seemed to stretch forever. And there, they built something that did stretch forever. A love that outlasted their lifetimes, a family that grew and prospered, a legacy of choosing courage over fear. She had traveled west to start over alone. He had convinced her to start over with him. And together, they created something neither could have achieved separately. A life full of meaning, joy, challenge, and love. A life that proved the best things are worth waiting for, worth risking for, worth fighting for. Their story ended, as all stories do, with death. But it also continued, as the best stories do, in the lives they touched and the family they created. Love like theirs does not die. It transforms, carried forward in the hearts and actions of those who come after. On the hill where they rest together, the roses bloom every spring without fail. Red and fragrant, bending in the breeze, reaching toward the sun. Beautiful and resilient, just like the love they represent. A love that started with a chance meeting and grew into something legendary. A love that proved happy endings are not just for fairy tales, but for anyone brave enough to take the risk. Austin and Beatrice Abbott, a rancher and a teacher, a man and a woman, two souls who found each other when both needed it most. Their love story, born in the Wild West of 1883, lived on through generations, a testament to the enduring power of taking chances, granting second opportunities, and believing that starting over can lead not to mere survival, but to the most extraordinary life imaginable.